You're listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at No Schedule Man on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /No Schedule Man. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality.
Hi, I'm Kevin. Thank you for taking some time to join me. I hope you're having a terrific day. I call this the No Schedule Man podcast. No Schedule Man? Well, it pretty much equals the journey is the destination. It's about choosing hope, embracing change and impermanence, and finding opportunities in every challenge. You may as well, because the challenges, they're going to keep coming, whether you like it or not. I guess you could consider No Schedule Man to be my preferred alter ego, the person that I aspire to be. And a big part of that process in trying to find it and maintain it is looking for and learning from others who are also on that journey of positive change and self-improvement. That's the process that brought me to today's guest, the incredible Michelle Dutrow. Michelle is the host of her own show. It's called the Game Changer Podcast, and she's also the creator of InnerNorthStar.com. A military veteran, she's going to tell us that story at the outset of our conversation. Michelle later joined the fire department at age 35. She also has spent 15 years working in the field of preventative medicine and some other things mixed in there as well that she'll explain. She's currently a certified biofeedback instructor and supervisor and a certified strategic intervention life coach, among many other things, like, for example, as I've already said, a podcast host. Michelle describes herself as being inspired by people who are willing to risk it all to pursue their dream, to stand up for what they believe, or go above and beyond to help somebody else. Like me, Michelle's got a natural curiosity about the mindset of these kinds of people, and she loves to discover what is it that sets them apart. She refers to these kinds of people as game changers. And by reaching out to them, she's able to share the stories of their challenges, their successes, and most importantly, their why behind what they do. She does that with the Game Changer podcast. Now, does that sound at all familiar? I hope so. It should. When I learned about Michelle and read about her podcast, I knew I had to connect with her, and I'm so glad I did. You're about to hear why. She is a dynamic, energetic ball of fire who inspired me with her story and really challenged me with her passion for what she does. Here are a handful of key things that I took from the conversation with Michelle. They included, number one, structure and discipline as it relates to creativity, as opposed to being, what you might think of words like free-spirited or relaxed or loose or wishy-washy, hairy-fairy, I'm a creator, I'm an artist, man. Well, you can take it as it comes and be relaxed about it and let your art just sort of express itself in your own time. But you've got to have some kind of structure and discipline along the way, enough of it anyway, to actually get yourself to complete and then actually share your creative gifts. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to be of benefit to anyone, and your gifts will remain unopened. So, yeah, take it relaxed and take it loose and do your thing, but give it enough structure and discipline so that others might be able to benefit from your gifts as well. Number two, we talk about the snow globe. I love this analogy. Listen for it later in our conversation, where everyone needs time to just be with zero input. Our lives are filled with so much noise. And so when we know that we're being distracted by the noise and it's stressing us out, what do? We turn to a different type of noise. And then we just jump from one noise to another. Rather than constantly changing the channels, try just turning the whole thing off. Or like the snow globe, when you see those flakes of snow just falling and settling, every once in a while, at least once a day, just let those flakes settle and let it go clear. Build some awareness and see how you feel. Michelle talks about that. Number three, making friends with challenge. We talked about this, I did, at the outset. The challenges are going to keep coming. So there's never going to be a time when there are not going to be any more new challenges. I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no there when it comes to not having any more challenges, personally or professionally. Whether you're driving forward or not, there's always going to be another one along the way. So you can smooth that process and make yourself a little bit more capable through accepting and embracing that idea and knowing that you're empowered enough to succeed in spite of or even because of those challenges. Make friends with the idea of the next challenge is on its way, and it's okay. You can handle it, and you can thrive on top of that as well. Another wave is coming. Get ready to ride it. And number 4, you don't get what you want. You get who you are. Let me say that again in a different way. You don't get what you want. You get what you are. Think about that for just a moment. You don't get what you want. You get what you are. That's just an example of a whole bunch of really impactful and incredible and valuable things, in my opinion, that Michelle shares with us in this conversation. So get ready for some energy. Here is Michelle Dutrow on the No Schedule Man podcast. Michelle, how did you ever end up wanting to go into the military?
You know, that is an interesting question because it absolutely, for anybody that knows me, knows that is probably the farthest away thing that you would ever expect me to do. I'm very independent. I'm as well also collaborative, meaning, hey, we should all be here to make everything better, right? And it turns out the military is not super interested in thoughts and feedback as to how the military could be made better, which I certainly learned quick enough. But the why behind that is I was in college, but actually spending more time playing volleyball on the beaches of Santa Barbara than actually in class. And so one day truly it was kind of a self-reflection thinking, okay, unless you really think you're good enough to go pro at volleyball, which I can assure you I was not, then you're going to be 45 years old playing beach on the volleyball and accomplishing nothing with your life. You have zero discipline. So I sat back and thought, if I'm lacking discipline to really, get on track and get my life together, who could help me with that? And the first thing that came to mind was the military. The military, I don't think it's an option. I think you have to be disciplined. Now, I don't have any family members. I don't have any friends. I literally knew nobody who went to the military. It's not anything to do with my background. It just seemed logical. And then my next thought was, well, if you're going to, you look at all 4 branches, who's the most disciplined? Well, that's got to be the Marines. And the only reason I did not go into the Marines was because the Marines, the Navy, and the Army all had a 6-year commitment. And I thought, if I can't even fully commit to 4 years of college, how am I committing to 6 years of that? And the Air Force was 4 years. So by default, honestly, is the only reason I did not join the Marine Corps. So that was the why, was I thought I was lacking discipline and needed to get it fast. And that seemed to be the most logical place. I can assure you that my first night in basic training during shakedown, I thought, hey, is there an opt-out of that was actually a bad idea, and I'm going to go ahead and take that return bus back to California? Yeah, it turns out, no, that was a 4-year decision that I paid for dearly. Don't regret a thing of it. Honestly, like I said jokingly, I think that the military celebrates the day that I left louder than me leaving. So it's all good.
Yeah, you led right into kind of why I was asking that, because from the moment I found out about you, you struck me as such a free, open, collaborative, creative, abstract kind of a spirit. And these are big, broad terms, but I think you know what I mean. And then I thought, boy, to be stuck in that kind of structure and discipline, and you were able to peg that right away. But you just said something, Michelle, that really tweaked my interest. You told yourself as a young woman that you didn't have enough discipline?
Yeah, well, I didn't. Sure. That's exactly right.
Well,
yes.
Who among us do when we're like... Were you always that way as a young person, that you were kind of your own, not harshest critic, but judge and jury? Same thing, I guess.
have been. Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe part of it is being an only child that I had and just raised by my mom. So it was just her and I, and you could imagine she worked a lot trying to support both of us. And so I had a lot of just me time. And when you have a lot of me time, and this goes back, certainly not to date myself, but, all the way through high school, even there was no such thing as computers. I was my senior year in high school still typing on a typewriter. So it wasn't as though there were all of the multitudes of ways right now to entertain yourself. There wasn't that growing up, early 70s. And so I had a lot of time in self-reflection. And so it was kind of, I guess by default, there was not a mentor or a coach or anybody who said, a life worth living is a life worth self-reflection over. I didn't have that, but it just, I guess, wound up being by default. You have a lot of time to yourself. You have a lot of time to think. And my default wiring was what could be better tomorrow, and how could I be better? How could I do better? How could I, contribute in a greater way? That thought process has stayed with me my entire life. Is at least a daily reflection. Certainly, I don't wait for the once a year goal setting. It is a common practice of mine. And certainly by the time I left high school, I graduated at 17. It wasn't long for me to realize, I really don't have my act together and I need to do something. Absolutely.
Wow. I'd love to introduce you to my 13-year-old son, because he's similar to that. He just declares to me things out of the blue like, I'm working on my study habits. I know that I'm better off to just do, 15, 20 minutes every single night rather than wait and cram it all at the end. Or the other night he says to me, you know what, Dad, I'm trying to be more dececisive. I realize
right.
I can, I'm not always going to be right, but and I think, buddy, you've got a 30-year head start on me. Like, I don't know where you're getting this from, but,
right. Making a decision is better than flailing around, even if it's a wrong decision. And my daughters, I have 2 daughters, and they've always been that way as well. I mean, even keeping me in check, I think from the time they were, 3, 4, and 5 years old. So I will agree that the millennium crowd has got something, I think, on all of us. But for whatever reason, I did have a lot of downtime all while growing up, and did spend an awful lot of it thinking about the world or things or how things could be better in general. And I can assure you the military did not appreciate that thought pattern very much of, hey, folks, while I'm here, how about we go ahead and up the game of the entire, United States military, and them reminding me, that's actually not why you're here. So no. Anyway.
Well, one of the things that I've perceived that has maybe come through that part of your journey and some of the stuff that's come after that is that creativity and structure are not things that have to be mutually exclusive one way or the other, right, Michelle? Like you can have structure and a work ethic and an energy to put into things that are creative, but creativity doesn't necessarily mean having to be all abstract and wishy-washy. One might argue it's better when there is some structure brought to it. Do you see what I mean?
I do. And I think it is that left brain, right brain balance, right? So it's great if you are a creative, but if you're a creative that actually never winds up producing anything, then who gets to be the recipient of your great talent and creativity? No one. It's if, let's say you started 100 paintings in your painting studio, but never finished one of them. That means they can never be sold or given away or whatever it is. There's no ultimate finished product. Then at the end of your lifetime, what was the point of it? What was the point of your brilliance if nothing ever got done in order to show the world? So there, I believe, does have to be a balance between the two so that you can get things done. You can move forward, even if it's, maybe not the best, and you've got to say, okay, here's my deadline, and I'm going to throw that out to the public to get feedback to then improve the second thing. That in and of itself requires discipline, right? Requires us to have some kind of goal setting, some kind of timelines. Or I think it's just very easy for us to fall back on the story of, well, I'm just a creative, that the other half of my brain just doesn't really work that way. And that's a story. It's an excuse. It's a fallback. It's a crutch. But I think it's also what limits people and what holds people back from truly being their best selves is not having that balance between the two.
So how do you end up after your 4-year run in the Air Force transitioning to a firefighter and an EMT?
Well, okay, if you didn't like the first story, you're not going to like the second one because it's the same story all over again. So there's about 10 years of sales in there in between all of that. And I was in a sales job and same reflection, thinking, do I really want to have on my tombstone, here's Michelle Dutrow sold more widgets than anyone. Now, if you are listening and you're in sales, by no means am I slamming or degrading anybody in the sales field. It takes all of us in this world to make the world go round. I can just tell you for me, that really wasn't my thing. And even being in sales, I was really more about relationships than I was in what I sold. I could never tell you what my numbers were for the month or for the year for that matter. It just wasn't where my head was. Everything was, hey, how could I help you? So if I could connect you that needs X from this person over here who's got it with Y, and somehow you guys found that a benefit, and then along the way you appreciated what I did, so you bought whatever my thing was, all the better. But it wasn't my driving force. And so in that, this was an annual reflection. This was a January year kickoff time of, okay, Michelle, if you don't want your life to be in sales forever, then what is it? Then what do you want your life to stand for? What do you want your legacy to stand for? What do you want that contribution to be? And so I thought, well, I would like to be in service. I would like to be the most helpful human being I possibly could be. And I thought, well, I'll be a doctor. I think doctors are, by and large, the most helpful people. People turn to them in, dire times of need and life and death. And then I looked at the clock and thought, you're 33 years old. Nope, that I'm not going to wait till I'm 60. I couldn't do 4 years of college back in the day. I'm sure not throwing another 15 or 20 on top of that. That's not going to work. But I thought, I could be a nurse. They're helpful. They're the secondary helpful. That's what I'll do. Okay, if you're going to be a nurse, who's the most helpful nurse? That would be an ER nurse. I will be an ER nurse. That is the most helpful I'll be an ER nurse. And I thought, is there anybody more helpful than that? And I thought, well, the person who's got to make sure you survive before you even make it to the ER. Someone's got to keep you alive to even get there. And I thought, that's it. Is there anybody bigger than that? And I thought, well, no, you're at the car wreck. Is there anybody helpful? Nope, that's it. They're the last stop before the rest of that chain of events. So that was my why, was on this mission of who do I think is the most helpful in what I could show up as in the world was, okay, a firefighter EMT has got to be what that is. I had no idea how difficult it was to get hired, or I would have certainly started that journey a lot earlier. I just thought you apply for a job, go to an interview and call it good, which for all the firefighters out there, people who know firefighters, that's not how that game works. I tested for 2 years all over the place. It was the final test I was taking. I was going to throw in the towel. And that one, that department, they had 1,400 people show up on opening day to turn in their application, and they were hiring 10, which is about the averages, right? I mean, so if you're out there listening to this and you're thinking, I'd like to be a firefighter, but don't wait, because it's insanely competitive and hard to get into. But that was my why. My why was I wanted to leave a legacy and contribute in the best way that felt like it was my soul's calling that I could possibly do.
So what happened then once you fulfilled that goal?
Yeah, well, let's keep on that same train of thought. So here's Michelle constantly saying, am I doing the best I can do in this role? And, 80% of firefighter calls are medical calls. About 20 are actually fire related. So 80% of your time is on medical calls. And of those, they're largely preventable. So it's the diabetic seizure, after the chest pain, after the heart attack, all of these things I knew, boy, with some education, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't need to call 911. So we'd be on these calls and I'd say, hey, look, now that you're okay, let's walk through your kitchen. Let's talk about what you're eating. Let me look in your refrigerator. Let's sit down and talk about lifestyle choices. And the rest of the crew tapping their watch saying, Michelle, we're emergency medicine. We're in and we're out. We're not life coaches here. So let's go. And they were right. There's a time and a place for everything. I realized after a while that my place, my calling was on the other side of the fence on prevention, preventing people from ever having to dial 911 to begin with. So then I went into private practice for about the next 10 years in exactly that, in preventative health and wellness, in a myriad of different certifications, but all in mindset, in what you need to be thinking to even want to create a healthy way of living to begin with. And then certainly homeopathy and biofeedback and yoga and meditation all came into the fold over the progression of 10 years.
It sounds like the question of why continues to be an evolving process, as opposed to this old paradigm of you get through a certain part of grade school and then decide, what do you want to do with your life? Which right. That idea, boy, it took me a few too many decades, Michelle, to finally let that one go, realize that it wasn't serving me. Whereas in each step of the story that you've told so far, it sounds like you are continuing to kind of reevaluate that why and adjust as you go. How fair is that to observe?
It is. And what I think it is that I would hope that, and certainly the people that I coach or that I work with or talk to, is we're always learning and growing. So if you're living the life that the 18-year-old you decided upon, as let's say a 40, even a 35, but 35, 40, 45, 50-year-old, how many 50-year-olds out there are turning to an 18-year-old for life advice? Not many. But if we stick with the decisions that we made when we were 18, essentially that's what we're doing. We're saying, no, I made that decision back in the day. Clearly, it's still got to be right. Well, there's no way. You've grown, you've evolved, you have 20, 30 years of life experiences. So it would be logical that the choices would evolve along with you. And I think that you're exactly right. We park that. We make the decision and say, this is what I signed up for. This is my life or my lot in life, depending on how you look at it. Instead of every day, am I doing the best I can do with the natural talents, skills, and abilities that I have every day? And certainly every week, every month, and at the very least, for crying out loud, once a year, evaluate. Here's who I am. Here's what I feel like my soul's calling. Here's my true nature. Here's some skills I've learned over the last year. Is this still the best match for how I'm spending my time? And before you ask why'd you start a podcast, I'm going to jump right into that, is exactly that. Half of the people that I saw in my practice had multiple homes and the boats and the fancy cars and more money they could spend in this lifetime, yet felt they had a very unfulfilling life. And then there was another spectrum of people who, by all, what our standards of society would be, you're thinking, well, I don't know that you're really very successful. It looked like maybe they were struggling financially or didn't have the biggest house or took the bus, didn't even own a car. Yet those folks, now I'm generalizing here, but felt like they had the happiest, most fulfilling life ever. And so the reason for the podcast was, if I could bridge those stories of what does it take to really create a fulfilling life, to really create a life that you love, that you wake up in the morning and you're fired up for, and you jump out of bed and you can't wait to get things going. And every night that you recap how your day went and what you're going to do different to really make tomorrow better. What does that take? And I'll tell you, the more time you spend really understanding who you are, your core self, your soul, your true nature, the more you dial in with that and then ask yourself, how much of my time every day is in alignment with that? And the more you can connect those two. So the more you could do a job and get paid for what your soul's calling is. Let's say you love art, you become an art teacher, right? It's how much you can align your time every day with what you truly love to do will be in direct parallel with how fulfilling you find your life. Now, you really want to jack that. You really want to put that, 10x that. Now do that. Find a way to do that in contribution of another. So whatever that thing is, whatever your soul's calling is, if you can make that to the betterment of someone, your neighborhood, your community, the globe, then even more, because at the end of the day, what is this game all about? Contribution. How can we give back? How can we leave something, someone, this place, this earth, a little better than when we got here?
What are some of the, I'm looking for the right vocabulary here, Michelle. I'm going to use the word resistance for want of a much better word, but some of the maybe initial resistances that you might receive from people, if anything, when they're first confronted with the idea, or presented with the idea is probably a better way to say it, of doing what you love and spending more time putting your passions into that, as opposed to being stuck on the paradigm of doing what I think I'm supposed to do because I have all these responsibilities. How do people react to that?
So a couple of different things. And, a lot of people have a story, right? Because it's easy. And so the usual one is, I don't have enough time, money, or resources to pull that off. I'm over here. I'm married. I've got kids. I've got a house I've got to run. I've got this job I've got over here. And now you want me to try to figure out, let's stick with the art thing. You want me to try to figure out how to not only sell art, maybe online, but maybe start a little weekend art school. Well, how am I doing that with what time? Well, here's the truth of it. We all will make time for what matters to us, period. End of story. Every one of us will do that. When you look at CEOs of large corporations, typically married, typically have a family, typically also sit on boards of many other organizations, typically also go to the gym, typically also spend time reading. Highly successful people are diversified and cover a lot of things in life. They don't just go to their job and come home. It just doesn't work that way. So when you think about it, and we're going back to kind of how this conversation started, which is, how do you maximize your time? How are you more effective in everything you do so that everything you do is more effective on a much larger scale? All of this you can figure out if you want to. Now the question then comes, why don't you want to? If this truly is who you are and what you love, then where we get to the real fear is, I don't mind if I fail. Let's say I think I'm this artist, and my job as an accountant is okay. It's so-so. It's whatever it is. I don't necessarily take that failure or that, well, whatever, it's just a job, to heart, because I know it's not my calling. It's not my purpose. It's not my mission in life. That is very different than if I start this art school and it fails, and that's my true calling. That's my purpose in life. That's like my whole reason for being, and I can't pull that off. Now I have failed at a soul level as a human being. And that fear of failure of, oh my gosh, then what? Because if this accounting job over here doesn't work out, well, whatever, I'll go get a job over at XYZ. Maybe I'll go sell things. I'll go whatever. There's a lot of different things I could go do in said field. I'm not too wrapped around the axle with it. But if you were to fail, at what your sole purpose in life is, I think that fear is so great for people that they would rather not know. They'd rather not cross that bridge than get there, have it fall apart, and then think, holy cow, at least then I could dream. At least then I could talk with my friends at the cocktail party saying, oh, someday I'm going to open up that art school because it's fun to talk about. But if I fail at it, then what? Then what's the point?
I think the other side to that coin is, what if I'm successful?
Right. But most people don't challenge that. Most people are not. Well, let me take that back because you bring up a great point. The what if I'm successful is what will that cost me? Right.
I think that you alluded to that with, or my interpretation of it was how when you described what lives can like when they're diversified was the word that I think that you used. And when you're looking at something from your present comfort zone and projecting, whether it's failure or success, that terror barrier, that wall of fear is enough to stop a lot of us of thinking, well, things are going to change or they'll be different or I'll have to do X differently to achieve Y. I suppose it's all fear-based, isn't it?
It is all fear-based. And I'll tell you this thing of, what is it going to cost me? Right? Am I going to have to, are my friends going to think, oh, look at it, isn't she just so full of herself over there thinking that she can just grow and become bigger than us and become this big dreamer, right? It's that tall poppy syndrome. As soon as we get too big, the other poppies in the field cut us up at the knees and make sure that we stay at the same level. And that's a very real thing. So if you have a bunch of naysaying friends who are going to be the first ones to tell you, hey, there ain't no free lunch. It's just not going to work out that way. Life is just too hard. You should just be happy with what you have. Then part of that reality is there may be some people in your life that need to go away if you are going to succeed. So everything that we're doing in life always has got this, what is this going to cost me factor? My ultimate question is, what will it cost you if you never, ever do chase down that dream? Because that in and of itself, that has a tremendous cost. And when we think, okay, let me come back and talk to you in 5 years. And in 10 years, and in 20 years, and ultimately I'm sitting by your deathbed, and we're talking about how you never, ever painted even one painting, certainly never got near that art school. What does that feel to your soul then? And that depth, that pain, there's a saying that I always had up in a plaque in my office that said, the risk of staying in a tight bud one day became greater than the risk it took to bloom. And everybody's got to get to that point, is stop and think about what it will be like for your life if you never live into the reason for you being here. And we all have that. Every single person on the planet has a unique fingerprint that says, my mark is this. No one does art the way you do. No one writes the way you do. No one does a podcast the way you do. No one does a podcast the way I do, right? We're all very different in how we express whatever our talents are. And the reason we have those talents is because we're meant to express them. We're meant to inspire people out there in the world by them so that they then do the same. And to not do that, to have your entire life tiptoeing to your grave, is, I think, that the single worst failure that there ever could be is that of the one fear of failure that you should have, if you're listening, is that you calmly and safely and within your comfort zone, carefully tiptoe to your grave to not make any waves, to make sure that you got there safe and sound. That to me is the most horrifying thought that there could be.
I'm wondering if we could change trajectories just a little bit, Michelle, and I wonder if you could tell me about a couple of times that you can remember that were particularly challenging times in your life.
I think anybody who's an entrepreneur would be absolutely lying to you if they didn't say that being an entrepreneur is a constant roller coaster, that there's no such thing as being done. Oh, good thing I got through that challenge. Now it's easy sailing. Now I've got it all figured out. And so what I think the mastery is getting to the point that you expect challenge, that you know that you're putting yourself out there, that such that if you go too long without a significant challenge, then you're playing it safe, right? In my early days, though, before I really understood the significance of becoming friends with challenge, with adversity, was financially. I had poured everything into my biofeedback practice, every last dime that I had to my name, and it was still a struggle. Because you're jack of all trades, right? You're not only the practitioner, you're the head of marketing, you're the head of finance, you're the CPA. And so all of that, outside of being a mom at the same time, is there's little breathing room for self-reflection of how you doing? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating? When was the last time you ate? How much sleep are you getting? And pretty soon that snowball catches up of, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know that I can do this anymore. A support network is also insanely helpful. I didn't have a huge one back in that day because I had just left being a firefighter. That's where my friends were. Went over to a new field of alternative medicine. I didn't know anybody. I mean, I knew nobody in that field. So I didn't have a resource network or people to fall back on. And the most difficult time for sure for me was that first year of building my tribe, of figuring out how to make it with the limited finances that I had, learning how to maximize the money that I did have available and to not waste it, because it's very easy to do as an entrepreneur going, oh, those business cards, I had one word that I would change. I'll order a whole nother set. And you just start spending money on things that don't have a return on investment, that are just nonsense, that are your excuses for why you're not making it. And so that time period of struggle, which I would not change for anything, helped contribute to my strength and my backbone to then be able to withstand, whatever other storm was coming down the path. But it for sure was a very, very, very difficult year. I have said this before when I talk to moms who are struggling with the balancing act of saying, I don't know that I'm ever going to be a good enough mom. And I flat out say, I've got years that I don't remember. Like I don't know how my kids made it to school. I don't know how they ate. I don't know what went on around them. It's such a fog when you're trying to keep all the plates spinning in the air, and all we can ever do is the best that we can. But I'll tell you, to find a mentor, to find a coach, to build your tribe, single best piece of advice I would have is the more you can do of that upfront and early on, the less challenge life will be if you have that in place. I didn't. That would be a do-over for me if I could.
Given the fact that you know and have accepted that the challenges are going to keep coming, and I think that's true whether you're an entrepreneur or not, right, Michelle? They're just different kinds of challenges, right? So
absolutely.
You know that the next wave is always behind the one that's right in front of you. And it might be bigger, it might be smaller, but it's coming, and it's probably going to bring friends. What then was it after that period of that year that you described, that you got through that? What was it that gave you the sense, okay, I can do this? I know there are going to be more waves, but I'm kind of not over the hump, but I think you know what I mean. That okay, I can make a go at this. What was it that told you that you'd kind of reached that point?
It was it's a great question. It was a breaking point, actually, and I realized that so much of my energy was showing up in fear and in doubt. Am I going to make it? Am I going to make, the next time I've got to the grocery store? Am I going to make getting another 5 clients in? And all of it was so insanely fear-based. Now, I'll tell you, this is for anybody out there who has any background in Chinese medicine. I wound up with a kidney infection. And being in alternative health, you don't get sick, you don't have illness, you don't have any of that. But I went to the doctor, which I also don't do, but it was more pain than I could shake a stick at. And, the doctor said, yeah, you've got this kidney infection. And I sat there and thought, okay, so every organ holds a certain energy. So the liver is anger, right? Lungs are sorrow. And the kidney is fear. And so I left and on my drive home said, okay, now you're manifesting this in your physical body. You got to get very real about this. So as you know, my thought process we've covered many times was, okay, let's get to the bottom of what do you fear? What's going on here? What's your worst case scenario? What do you think is going to happen? This whole business is going to fail. Okay, worst case scenario, I'm not living under a freeway. I've had plenty of jobs before. I can go get another one. That's really not it. So it was peeling back this layer of what is it that I'm so afraid of? Why is so much of my energy living in fear and in doubt? And when I got to that, very difficult, it was a definitely dark night of the soul conversation of what is this going to take? What I finally got to was, here's what I do know. Even if I could list the 50 things that legitimately I am afraid of and fearful of and have self-doubt over, the reality is what I do know, I can't do this another day. I cannot wake up tomorrow feeling like this for one more minute of one more day. So here's the thing. You wake up tomorrow and make a choice. You either walk in with all of your, I've got an office set up, I'll sublease it out, sell all of my equipment and go have a job by next Monday and be done. Or you wake up tomorrow and say, everything in this world is possibility. everything has the option of actually going not just well, but really well. And if every coin has got a flip side, how about you start living and looking at the flip side of everything that can go right? And that's all you do. You give it a chance at least 30 days of every magical thing that can come your way, how this is going to go right, how that conversation is going to go well, how money's going to show up without you even expecting it. But every single thing, because this living in, halfway out, I get to the job, I could try to make it work. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I can't do it. So I gave myself a couple hours of sleep and knew that when I woke up, whatever decision, going back to your 13-year-old, make a decision. Living in this waffling back and forth is the most detrimental, worst thing you can do. So I knew I'd be okay with whatever decision that was, and I would not look back. And when I woke up, that decision was, there's no more fear. That's it. This is going to work. I've got this. I'm intelligent enough. I've done enough of my homework. I know enough people at this point. There's no reason why this won't work. It just will. And I am now going to believe and behave and take every action from somebody who knows that this is my path, my mission, my calling, and it's meant to succeed. And that was it. It was a turning point.
Yeah, burn the boats. I mean, you had already laid that stake in the ground, right, with what you said earlier about, I think that you already knew deep inside your spirit that you weren't going to get to the end of your life, whether that was going to be 5 minutes or 50 years later or more, and look back and have regret. So I think at a soul level, you'd already made that decision, but you needed to make it more on a sort of a conscious level, it sounds like, after having really kind of gotten into that. Have I described that even partway accurately?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think when we're honest with ourselves, right, there's always that little voice that is going to be a reminder of, okay, you're a fraud, or you're not good enough, or, who are you to say? And if we don't let that little voice control us, rather utilize that little voice to make us better, to keep us on point, to make sure we don't get arrogant or ahead of ourselves or too ego-driven, but rather keep us humble of saying, you know what, I'm not the smartest one in the room. I hope I'm never the smartest one in the room. I'm in the wrong room if I am, but that I always am striving to be the best version of myself and allow that little voice to not cripple us, but truly make us the best person we possibly can be every single day that we show up. And that was that balancing act of how loud and how frequent I was going to allow that voice to speak up in the room.
So let's go back to that point, Michelle. You wake up after having had the chance to consider it and decide, okay, burn the boats. We're going forward. Everything is possibility. What happened from that point with your kidney, with your overall health, with your business? What did life start to look like?
It's ridiculous, really. But if you read anything by Louise Hay or follow anything by Hay House or anybody who's big onto affirmations of what you believe, what you speak to the world, the energy you put out there is what's going to come back, is exactly accurate. So every single thing in my life, literally from that moment, turned around. And again, to your point, not that it's without challenge, not like that though. So hurdles of software crashing, you've got a podcast and the internet goes down, jackhammer next door to you, like all those kinds of stresses, which I've had them all. Living in San Francisco, it was always that way. As soon as I'd go to hit record, here's a jackhammer. So those sorts of things, we can start to manage stressors that are going to show up, but not the internal demons. I haven't battled those again. That's not ever been a game that I've had to play with myself called "You're not good enough, you don't know enough, who's going to listen to you," or who says you. That was put away that day. And so I would say of the life lessons that I've learned is truly of the things that you've got to be very mindful of. It is every single thought you ever have, because every thought you have is going to determine the action you're going to take, which is going to determine the energy that you're putting out in the world, which is what's going to come back at you, whether you say you want it or not. It's going to. So the thoughts that I have, I am very mindful of, okay, was that thought serving me? Was that even a positive thought? But pull that back in, rework it, send it back out. So that was a game changer for me, because every single thing in my world, literally on a dime, it just changed. It just changed. Finances weren't that struggle. Getting people weren't a struggle into my practice. Meeting people, attracting people, it all changed. And so one of the topics that I love most talking about is exactly that, is we don't get in this world what we want. We get in this world who we are. And if you are fearful, but say, I love a thriving practice that makes a lot of money, but you are fear-based and doubtful, that's what you're going to get back because it's truly who you are. So having those incongruency of what you say you want, what you believe to be true about yourself, thus leading to the actions you're taking because it is who you are, is everything. You've just got to look around your world. Your world, everything you have in it right now, is a direct reflection of every belief you have. Where you live, the amount of money you make, the relationship you're in, all of those are a reflection right now of the belief that you hold about yourself. There's just no other way around it.
The idea of being able to recognize and have the awareness of those negative thoughts when they pop up, I love that, and it's something that I can certainly relate to, and I'd encourage certainly people to look into it. I'm interested, though, in to hear your interpretation of the other side of that, Michelle. We talked a few minutes ago of sort of continuing to ask that big why, and then maybe we'll refer to it as intuition. Along the way, not only are those challenges, the next wave's always coming, but just because you feel really strongly about something right now doesn't mean that you don't feel like you might need to adjust it or tinker or tweak or go in a slightly different direction later today, tomorrow, next year. What is, as best as you can describe, when you get those directions sort of from the universe, whether it's in answer to an annual review of your big why, or even just those little bits of intuition that go, you might want to adjust this, or we might want to change track here. What does that feel like? How do you know that that's what's happening?
So I think everybody is wired much the same way. I will tell you that one of the greatest tools that I've picked up along the way is in Yoga Nidra. It's a form of guided meditation. And part of that education is body sensing. And typically the people who struggle the most with this is anybody who's suffered trauma of any kind. So by our own defense mechanism, we shut a section of either us or a section of our life away. It's too painful to think about. It's too painful to deal with. We certainly know about PTSD from returning veterans, but that shows up in many forms, child abuse, spousal abuse. It could be all kinds of things. And so we shut down part of our psyche to say, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to feel that. It's too painful. It's too hurtful. The more of those events, the more of those things that have happened to us where we lock away some of those memories, we also lock away part of ourselves. And so we learn truly as a survival mechanism, and part of it is serving us, is if I think about this, it will kill me. So we don't. But then what we also shut down is our ability to tune into ourselves, into what feelings and emotions, what they mean to us. So when we get a weird knot in our stomach, is that not excitement? Is that anticipation? Or is that, okay, that knot in my stomach I know means something's not right here, back away and then run. Now, if you aren't in tune enough with yourself to know the difference between what the hairs on your arm standing up mean, you're going to call the ball differently, maybe every time. And maybe some of the time or half the time, or even more often than not, making the wrong decision, assigning the wrong meaning to what you're feeling. So I would go back and say to that person, how much time do you spend in silence? No input, no television, no radio, no podcast, no internet, no smartphone, no anything, no music, nothing. Just in silence to sit with yourself and say, what am I feeling right now? How does my low back? How does my left leg feel? What's happening with my right ear? And just tuning in to what it feels like to feel. That alone is scary enough for a lot of people. I guarantee you there are people right now who are saying, I'm not doing that. I'm absolutely not doing that. And part of meditation for why people fear that is exactly this. It's not, oh, my mind races too much. I can't. No, it's, I don't want to slow things down enough to feel things that I'd rather not feel. The problem with that is the more we keep those things away, you try to lock them out the front door, they're going to come around the back door. They're going to come in a window. They're going to come in the chimney. They're not going to stop. And that's why we have triggered episodes, right? They get locked out, something happens, and boom, then we freak out. But if we can allow them in, allow it in like you're having a cup of tea. Okay, so what do you have for me here? That fear that a man who comes into your life that maybe looks like somebody from your childhood. Okay, allow that for a moment. You're present, you're here, they're not here. It's just in your mind. What does that feel like? Where does that resonate with you? And the more you can ease into those feelings and start to tune into yourself of what fear feels like, what joy feels like, what anxiety feels like, what anticipation feels like, then the more when we're going through our day and something happens and you get that feeling, you go, oh, I know what that is. I know what that feels like to me. Then that intuition becomes so much more sharp. And this is something that everybody has the skill of. Everybody has the skill to master with time. But it starts with you first have to be good with sitting with whatever shows up without judgment, right? If hatred shows up, the first thing we want to do is stand back in judgment and say, oh my gosh, I'm a good person. I shouldn't feel hate. No. It's just an emotion. It's just a thought. It's just an event that's showing up in your world. Acknowledge that it's there. And then say, okay, I see that you're here. Is there something you would like me to learn from you being in my presence right now? If there's something behind it that comes to you, otherwise say, okay, not right now. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. And then see what else shows up. And when a feeling shows up, sit with and ask yourself, where do I feel this? How do I feel it? I guarantee you the way you feel anxiety is not the same way I feel anxiety. But you and I should both know how we feel negative anxiety and happy anxiety in an instant so that we can recognize when we meet somebody in a flash, is that anxiety we feel somebody because we feel they're a good person and inherently on some level we know, or we feel there's something sketchy going on here and inherently we trust ourselves to know this isn't right. And if you don't know the difference, if you just lump everything as anxiety, half the time you're going to be wrong about who you're with. And that's a risky place to be. So that intuition of, what should I listen to? It all starts first with how well do I know myself? How well do I acknowledge, allow without judgment every feeling that I have, understand where they resonate, and then act on those things immediately that bring you joy. There is a reason when something makes you happy, when something brings joy to you, when something brings a smile to your heart, that butterfly feeling, that feeling that you've been talking to somebody, you look at your watch and it's been an hour and you thought it was 10 minutes. All of those things register, say, in this moment where I felt so great, where did I feel it? Start there. Where did I feel it? Oh, I felt my heart was lighter. I felt this, flutter. Okay, tune into that. So then next time when that shows up, pay attention because these are all your soul's calling to say, do more of this. We were meant to be happy. We are meant to be joyful. Pull more of that into your life. And when something shows up on your radar that's like, okay, that just doesn't feel right, trust it. The more time you spend with yourself, trust it. That's your internal guidepost to say, way less of that, way more of this. We were not meant to live a life of misery. We just weren't.
It's interesting to me anyway, Michelle. I was considering even starting out with this is that because I I knew from having listened to the Game Changer podcast and read a little bit about you that I knew that you were an absolute force of nature and an absolute fireball of energy. And I mean that as a compliment, by the way. But when I read things like meditation, yoga, wellness, words like that, I'm reminded of old ideas of mine that I had in a previous version of myself where I would associate those words with sort of almost chilled out, and slow.
Yeah,
and we were
tree huggers.
Well, when you start throwing around words like peace and stillness and quiet and sitting, and there's a certain, I'm looking for the right word. It's not paradox, it's not irony, but it's almost sort of like that idea of slow down to go faster. Like if you're a high energy person and you're driven to succeed, it can be difficult to wrap your head around. You need to turn the car off and let the engine cool down sometimes so that it can go at top speed when you need it to, right? But you're not sacrificing any of that energy. You're actually feeding it by giving some quiet to it.
Absolutely. You know who I think spoke to this that really kind of gave this a voice? I don't know if you know who Dan Harris is. So this is, the U.S. He's on Good Morning America. But he wrote a book called 10% Happier. And this was a point that he made in this book. And he was, I think, the start of somebody saying, hey, if you meditate, this is not going to take away your edge. And this is, I think, what a lot of people fear is, hey, I like being a type A personality. I like being on my A game. I like being driven. The last thing I want to do is start sitting in a room oming and chanting with people wearing white linen clothes for hours on end. Like that, there's no benefit in that. And I get the paradox. The last thing people are ever going to assume, one, that I was ever in the military for sure, but two, certainly, is that I would ever sit in meditation. I will tell you, the only way I can have this level of focused energy and focused drive and enthusiasm for life is not in spite of my time in meditation, it's because of it. Otherwise, I would be scattered. My energy would be all over. I'd be talking about 20 different topics that aren't even related because my mind would be all over the place, right? So my time in silence, and it's every day. And if I go too long around too many people, too many days in a row, and I realize I have not had my time, I can feel myself getting fragmented. I can feel myself losing focus. I actually feel myself massively losing my edge because I haven't had time. And it's not just in journaling or doing, it's the opposite of that. It's just in being. It's the no input. It's the no doing. It's the allowing the snow globe of thoughts to settle down so that then they can be shaken up again. And without that, I will tell you, your effectiveness, your ability to do more with less time will be directly related to the amount of time you put into stillness and zero input. Directly related. I will tell you this, I have never, ever, times never, talked to anybody who has worked in a, let's just not even call it meditation, just worked into a practice of no input, just worked into a practice of quiet time that didn't say that their life is so much better and so much more effective and so much more energy and so much more drive because of it. Every single person. In time, you will see that. You're just not chaotic anymore. You're not running around looking for keys. Where'd I put this paper? See, all that is just chaos. It's just a million thoughts going on in a blender all the time with no direction. Then going back to your question, what about this idea? Hey, what if you do this? Hey, what if I should do that? Now everything becomes an option because there's no focus. There's no direction. There's no, what is my path? All of that comes to you in stillness. So when you know your path, you know your calling, and someone says, hey, I've got this great opportunity over here to invest in real estate. Let's go talk about it. Your first thing is, okay, I know my path. I know my mission. Does it have anything to do with that whatsoever? No, you don't even need to tell me how great this is because it actually has nothing to do with me. Now, I know Betty over here, and I know that she was just mentioning that. Can I connect you to? Like maybe that's why they told you that, was to connect you. When people say, well, everything happened for a reason. Yeah, sometimes you're just a connector. Not every opportunity was meant for you. It was meant for you to tell somebody else about it. Clarity. What is your purpose? What is your legacy? Why are you going to be here? That is going to make such a difference in so many other people's lives. So when those opportunities come up for you to go, you know what? I think that's actually a better version of myself, like me going into preventative medicine instead of being on the emergency medicine side. All trying to be helpful, all leading to the ultimate same legacy of how can I be in the best service for others, but much more fine-tuned tweaking for my soul's particular calling, that when I really thought about it, I thought that is actually more in alignment with me being on this side of the fence than on this side of the fence, even though both yards are called trying to help people stay alive. Right? Just a different avenue to get there. Yeah, absolutely. With the situation that you described when you've had several days and there's just been no space, the word I find myself using is claustrophobic. That's how I start to feel when I just it's not even a thing that I need to do or not do. I just need space. Just need quiet. And I love that you used the snow globe analogy because I just said that to one of my colleagues earlier this week about an episode that I was having, but I don't want to divert us. Although I do want to ask about thinking about the snow globe. Once all of those flakes settled, how did the clarity present itself in the form of a podcast amidst all this other stuff? You already talked a little bit about why you're passionate about talking to the people that you do with the Game Changer podcast, but how did that idea first present itself to you and make you so convinced that that was a medium that you needed to explore? So you can tell I don't mind talking. So there was I hadn't noticed. Right, I know. I like to invite people on here that I say, I ask them something and they say yes. Right.
And then you hear crickets and jackhammers, right?
Yeah. I've never been accused of, oh, look, Michelle was in the room. We hadn't noticed. Yeah, that's never going to happen. So in this same vein of, okay, obviously I enjoy talking. I'm a big communicator. Maybe it's not always effective, but I certainly am a communicator. When thinking of that same thought of what is the best way I could be in service to others, and I told you these two groups of people that I wished they could come together. And in that, why aren't people leading a fulfilling life? And it was a question that you asked, what holds people back? What is that fear? What is going on there? Everything you want to do in life, part of it is skill set. Part of it is the idea of go invest in real estate and, sit down and learn how to take maybe a realtor's exam. Part of that is skill, but 90% of it is your mindset. And so I knew that in my working on the wellness side with people, it wasn't just here's what you should be eating. It isn't just here's why you should be exercising. It's not here's why you should leave that job that you can't stand or the relationship that is abusive. It was let's get into the mindset of why you find any of this acceptable to begin with. Because until we change this, it won't be long lasting. It won't be a way of life. It'll be something you're doing for a period of time. And so I knew that if I wanted to inspire people to live a life they love, the bigger part of that equation was let's get in the mindset for you to actually want that for yourself to begin with. And it was in that if I like to communicate, and I'm certainly, no stranger to talking, no matter how big the audience is. And if I wanted to communicate that passion and that fire and that drive and have people listen to stories of human beings that are actually doing that and doing that well, that don't have more than you do right now, that didn't come from, a billionaire dad called Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, that didn't go to Harvard or Yale, didn't even graduate from high school, yet they're making things happen. So if you can realize, that person's making it happen and they don't have any more than I do, and then I can incorporate mindset in behind that, then maybe somebody out there listening will say, maybe today's my day. Maybe today's the day that I am going to start on my path of what my mission is here in life. And I'm going to do a little something every day to get there, to get closer to that, to live that life of true authenticity. And so the podcast medium seemed like an obvious one to me. I think that in talking with my friends, while YouTube is certainly a very big medium and people love video and watching people, there's also our mobile world. And when you look at millennials, that whether they're in their cars now rolling out of the assembly line have podcasting on the dashboard as a button. I knew that this was really the start of this movement. We're not even midstream. We're really just in the beginnings of this. And whether it's someone on a hike or listening on an airplane or going out for a jog or wherever they are, it's somebody's voice very intimate in your ears that you can become a friend to. And you can be somebody that every week or a couple times a week they can rely on for consistency of messaging. And sometimes, going back to my first year of struggle, what I was missing was tribe. I didn't have my people. I didn't have people I could fall back on or I could turn to. And a podcast can be exactly that. Can be somebody that you can count on every week to listen to for that same words of encouragement, for that same here's what you can believe in for all the people out there that maybe don't have a friend that does that for them. Maybe they're surrounded by family and friends of naysayers. And I thought this right here, from a true intimacy friend to people that don't have them, to drive that consistent message of your life matters to me. So that's really the why behind it. I've always listened to podcasts since they've been out, and so it didn't take much convincing for me to say, okay, I'm going to throw my voice into the ring.
So what was it like for you when you first got started?
Ridiculous. It's not much better now. I've had 108 episodes, and I wouldn't say that it's a whole lot easier. It's let me answer it by saying this: when anybody says to me, oh, you have a podcast? That sounds like a lot of fun. I think I'm going to start a podcast. My response always is, are you now? Hey, tell me when that thing hits iTunes. I'll be the first person to subscribe, because odds are that's not happening. I don't mean to be the naysayer in the crowd, because I just said nobody needs to be that. Point is, it's a lot of work. Yep. You know this. Mm-hmm. It is so much work, not just technically finding the right guests, spending time to understand someone's background, having the guests that come on with the one-word answers or that answer a question that you didn't even ask, and now they're off on some tirade that has nothing to do with anything. all of it. And then the time on the show notes, the time in the marketing, all of this, if it's not a true love, I mean, it is a labor of love. If this is not your passion and what means everything to you, it is so much work that I think that's why, I don't know how long what the average show actually lasts, a couple of months. There's 300,000, I believe, roughly or so episodes that are out there, and not many, in the hundreds, if even that. Actually, I should go back and look at statistics for shows that have been around longer than a year. It's hard. It's hard work. But anything that matters is. Right? Anything that matters is going to be work. I finally have resigned myself after episode 50. This just isn't going to get easier. This just is always going to be the amount of work. Technical issues are just going to happen. The jackhammer is going to show up. The guest is going to forget about the episode. They're not even going to be there on recording day. All of that stuff, I have now just learned to laugh and go, well, of course, that's what's happening today. Perfect. That's how this goes. So, no, it's not easy. It's not easy.
But it's been worthwhile.
I love it. I love it. As we were just saying, I don't remember if you had hit the record button or not. It was right when we first started talking. But the truth is, the most amazing people I currently have in my life are from this podcast.
Yeah.
They're friends that I have made along the way, ideas, concepts, things that inspire and motivate me every day truly are from this show. From getting to talk to people like you on being on someone else's show that I might not have crossed paths with otherwise, that now you are going to be on my show. And so this synergy, this like-minded tribe of mine is now so vast and literally worldwide. Without this, there's no way it would have existed. There's no way. I'm blessed beyond measure, far more than the amount of work it takes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's similar for you at all. I suspect that it probably is, Michelle, but when I'm engaged in a conversation like what we're having right now, even just listening to you talk, I just sort of shake my head in gratitude and have this stupid smile on my face, thinking that, to use the word that you just tossed at me a few minutes ago, ridiculous. And how fortunate I feel to be able to connect with people and all around the world. Earlier today, I had a conversation with somebody who is in the UK, who had a completely different story arc than you or me, and a really difficult time up until she was in her early 50s. And she described the... I'm on a tangent here, forgive me, but she described the process of meeting somebody at an event, and they were... they had a disagreement or they didn't understand each other. So, but anyway, she said, "You have to forgive me. I'm only 4 years old." and I wrote that. But what she meant was from the time that she sort of had her understanding her why. And she lived more than a half a century before it had even occurred to her to ask. And that you can reach out and feel so connected to people through a medium like that. And I guess the way that I'll draw this back around is encouraging people to go and subscribe and listen and give feedback to you and the Game Changer podcast, because what you've done is you've just opened up a whole treasure trove of ideas and stories and shared experiences that people can go and consume at their leisure, right?
Exactly. And, you mentioned this. I was just talking to a guy yesterday in Australia. So it was 7:00 my time, Thursday, 7 at night, 4:00 his time the next day. And this is what this medium allows is what I think it also shows people is from Canada, the US, the UK, Australia, we all have the same struggle. We're all one. At the end of the day, when people have this feeling, if you're listening right now thinking, nobody has the problems I have, nobody would understand, that feeling of isolation, I think again, it's the reason for the tribe, is the single greatest detriment to getting out of what your current reality is and making it a different one, is realize you're not alone. There's somebody right now in Pakistan. There's somebody right now in Germany. There's somebody right now in Spain who has your same feelings, that has had similar experiences, that gets you. That getting your story out, that going and talking to people, listening to other people's story just so that you can feel, I'm not the only one struggling with this. I'm not the only one with the feeling that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not worthy, or that I'm going to be seen as a fraud because I shouldn't be talking on these topics because I didn't go to Harvard. We all feel that. We all feel that. Courage is not the lack of fear. Courage, by definition, is feeling fear and pushing through and walking ahead anyway. And that, I think, we get from others, from a tribe of people saying, I've got your back. You're not alone here. You're going to be okay. We're all here to support you. And this medium, these stories, getting these stories out, if even one other person says, if they can do it, I can do it, then all of this is worthwhile. All of it. And I know you get emails, I'm sure you do, I do, from people saying, hey, that one episode, that right there changed everything for me. I'm now going to leave my abusive relationship, or I am going to get my heart's content back in the day was motocross. I'm going to go take up motocross again. Even if it's on weekends and I'm 40 years old, I miss it and I loved it. And it was the one joy I had. Whatever that inspiration is, makes all of our time and our headaches and our traumas with the internet going down or jackhammers showing up, it makes all of it worth it, right? It's why we're here, to help one other person struggle a little bit less because of a shared experience is what we're all doing here.
One of these days, you're going to get a knock on the door, and there's going to be a delivery person there, and you're going to wonder what in the world is going on. And they're going to hand you a gigantic box. It's going to have a big, pretty little bow on it, Michelle. And you're not going to know where it's from, but it'll be postmarked from Canada. And you open it up, and inside there's going to be a jackhammer, and it's going to say, hello from Kevin. I've written it down. Michelle, thank you so much for the time. This has just been an absolute pleasure and privilege, and I look forward to talking to you again down the road.
No, absolutely my honor and pleasure. Thank you for all of it.
You can reach Michelle at thegamechangerpodcast.com. All one word, thegamechangerpodcast.com. There you can access all past episodes of her show. And you can go and download Michelle's free ebook, which includes 11 life coaching lessons. And of course, you can also just go straight to iTunes and search The Game Changer Podcast and subscribe there. I know she'll appreciate it too if you left a review, an honest review, and a rating for the show. It all helps, so please do consider doing that. You'll also learn more about Michelle if you go to her other site, innernorthstar.com. Some terrific material up there, innernorthstar, all one word, .com. On Twitter, you can find Michelle at innernorthstar, and her Facebook page is facebook.com/innernorthstar. I'll make sure to post those links with the episode blog on my site at kevinbulmer.com. NoScheduleMan.com will take you to the same place. All my social channel links are listed up there. I hope that you'll connect if you haven't already, and hop on our email VIP list as well. We've got some great bonuses there, including an MP3 copy of my song Deja Vu. You're going to hear a clip of that in just a moment. It closes every single podcast. Also an exclusive 4-part email series on hope, creativity, accountability, and positive action, and a PDF of 5 great life lessons derived from some of the early guests of this very No Schedule Man podcast. I'd be grateful if you'd share and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or SoundCloud, or subscribe it, rate it, and review it on iTunes. Just go to any one of them and search Kevin Bulmer, Bulmer, or No Schedule Man, and you will find us. Thanks again for spending some time with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, remember, choose hope, embrace change, look for the opportunity in every challenge. I'll see you next time on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.